She was the kind of woman people remembered for small things. The way she smiled at strangers. The way she lowered her voice when others were angry. The way she always stood slightly behind her husband in public, letting him take the space, even when she carried the weight of everything at home. Friends said she had a calming presence. Family said she had a soft heart. Few noticed how tired she had become. She married young, believing love meant patience. In the early years, life felt simple. They built routines, shared dreams, and talked about the future late into the night. When money was tight, she stretched every coin. When her husband failed, she covered for him. When he promised a change, she believed him. Trust came easily to her. Pregnancy should have been a joyful time. She had imagined gentle mornings, slow walks, and quiet talks about baby names. Instead, her days were filled with silence. Her husband came home late. His phone never left his hand. He smiled at messages he never shared. When she asked questions, he brushed them aside and called her sensitive. She felt the distance growing, but she stayed quiet. She told herself stress made people cold. She told herself marriage had seasons. She told herself that love did not always look warm. At night, she placed a hand on her stomach and whispered apologies to the unborn child for the tension in the house. The rumor started quietly. A neighbor mentioned seeing her husband with another woman. A co-worker hinted at late dinners that looked like dates. She never confronted him with anger. Instead, she asked gently, hoping for honesty. He denied everything with practiced ease. He blamed work. He blamed misunderstandings. He blamed her worries on hormones. She wanted to believe him. Belief was easier than truth. As her body changed, her strength faded. The pregnancy was harder than expected. Doctors told her to rest, to avoid stress, to take care. She nodded and smiled, knowing rest was a luxury she no longer had. She cooked, cleaned, and waited. Some evenings, she ate alone at the table, staring at food gone cold. Her husband's absence was not just physical. When he was home, he was somewhere else. His eyes passed over her. His voice lacked warmth. He spoke to her like a duty, not a partner. Still, she defended him to others. She told her family he was tired. She told friends he was trying. Late one night, she found something she was not meant to see. The phone buzzed while he showered. A name she did not recognize flashed across the screen with a message filled with familiarity. There was no mistake, no misunderstanding. The truth settled into her chest like a heavy stone. She did not scream. She did not throw the phone. She sat on the bed and breathed slowly, afraid the baby would feel her pain. When he came out of the bathroom, she asked him one question. He did not answer right away. That silence said everything. The argument that followed was quiet, but cruel. He did not apologize. He accused her of spying. He said she had changed. He said pregnancy had made her difficult. He said the other woman understood him better. Each word cut deeper than shouting ever could. That night, she cried without sound. By morning, something inside her shifted. She stopped asking questions. She stopped seeking affection. She stopped expecting kindness. What replaced hope was not anger, but clarity. She began to observe instead of react. She noticed patterns. Money missing, sudden trips, calls taken outside. She wrote things down quietly, not out of revenge, but out of responsibility. There was a child to think about now. Her health continued to weaken. She fainted once while standing in the kitchen. Another time, she felt sharp pain that left her shaking. Doctors warned her again. Stress was dangerous. She promised to be careful, though her home offered no peace. Despite everything, she still spoke gently to her husband. She still cooked his meals. She still wished him safe travels. Not because she forgave him, but because she chose calm over chaos. Silence became her shield. In private moments, she made plans. She organized papers. She spoke to people she trusted. She did not tell them everything, but enough. She wanted protection, not pity. She wanted order, not drama. One evening, she stood by the window, watching rain fall, feeling the child move inside her. She whispered that everything would be okay. Whether she believed it or not, no one could tell. The night she was taken to the hospital, it happened suddenly. Pain, dizziness, Panic. She reached for her phone. Her husband did not answer. A neighbor heard her cry and called for help. The hospital lights were too bright. The air felt heavy. She held on as long as she could. Thoughts of unfinished words and unseen futures passed through her mind. She thought of the baby. She thought of truth. She thought of peace. When morning came, she was gone. The news spread fast. Family arrived in shock. Friends cried in disbelief. People spoke of her kindness, her patience, her quiet strength. Her husband showed grief in public, though something about it felt hollow to those who knew her well. No one yet knew what she had prepared. No one knew that her silence had meaning. No one knew that even in her weakest moments, she had been strong. And as the funeral plans began, the truth waited quietly, exactly as she intended. The days after her death moved slowly, like time itself was unsure how to behave. The house felt different. Too quiet. Too empty. Her belongings were still where she left them, untouched, as if she might return at any moment. Family members gathered, moving carefully through the rooms, afraid to disturb her presence. Her husband stayed mostly silent. He accepted condolences with short nods and practiced sighs. He spoke about loss, about fate, about how life could be cruel. Some believed him. Others felt something was off but could not explain it. Grief, after all, looked different on everyone. Then came the day of the funeral. The room was filled with people who had known her in small but meaningful ways. Neighbors she had helped, relatives she had supported quietly, friends who remembered her gentle laughter. The air was heavy with sadness, and every face carried the same question. How could someone so careful, so kind, be gone so suddenly? When her husband arrived, all eyes turned. He walked in with confidence, dressed neatly, his face serious. At his side was a woman no one expected to see. She wore dark clothes and heavy makeup, her posture bold, her grip on his arm firm. Whispers began instantly. People looked from one face to another, trying to understand what they were seeing. Some recognized her from rumors. Others only felt the shock of disrespect. This was not just a stranger. This was the woman everyone had warned the wife about. The husband did not hesitate. He guided the woman to the front rows, close to where family sat. He ignored the stares. He ignored the tension. It was as if he wanted to make a statement. Though no one understood why this moment mattered so much to him, the woman showed no sign of shame. She scanned the room with curious eyes, as if measuring reactions. When someone glared at her, she looked away calmly. When someone whispered, she lifted her chin. Her presence felt loud in a place meant for quiet grief. The wife's relatives sat frozen, anger mixed with pain. Some wanted to stand up and say something. Others held them back, reminding them this was not the time. Respect for the dead mattered more than public conflict. As the ceremony continued, memories of the wife were shared. Stories of her kindness, moments of her patience, the way she always put others first. Each word made the husband's actions feel heavier, harder to ignore. When it was his turn to speak, he stood slowly. His voice trembled just enough to sound believable. He spoke about love, about how she had been supportive, about how much she meant to him. The words felt rehearsed. Those who knew her well noticed what he did not say. He did not mention her strength. He did not mention the unborn child. He did not mention sacrifice. The woman beside him rested a hand on his arm as he spoke, a gesture that felt painfully wrong. Several people lowered their heads, unable to watch. After the service, tension followed everyone outside. Conversations were hushed. Questions went unanswered. Some family members confronted the husband quietly, asking why he would bring her there. He replied with cold calm. He said he had the right to move on. He said people should mind their own business. He said grief made others emotional. The woman stood nearby, listening, saying nothing. When the discussion ended, she smiled slightly, as if she had won something. That evening, the house filled again, but the warmth was gone. The husband moved through the rooms like he owned them fully now. He made phone calls freely. He laughed softly in private. The absence of his wife seemed to lift a weight rather than place one. But not everyone was fooled. A few of the wife's closest relatives noticed details others missed. Documents stacked neatly. Important papers already sorted. notes written in her careful handwriting. She had always been organized, but this felt different, intentional. One relative remembered a conversation from weeks before her death. The wife had asked strange questions about legal matters, about protection, about future plans. At the time, it seemed like normal preparation for a baby. Now it felt like something more. Meanwhile, the husband began making plans of his own. He spoke openly about selling property, about changing accounts, about starting fresh. The woman stayed close, offering opinions, suggesting ideas, acting like the future was already decided. Days passed, and sympathy from others slowly turned into quiet judgment. People talked, not loudly, but enough. The story of the funeral spread faster than anyone expected. His image began to change. One afternoon, an official letter arrived. The husband opened it casually, then frowned. It was a notice about a legal meeting, a will reading. He had assumed everything would come to him automatically. After all, he was a husband. No one had told him otherwise. He brushed off concern, telling the woman there was nothing to worry about. He said it was just a formality. He said the wife had never been the type to complicate things. But that night, sleep did not come easily. Elsewhere, members of the wife's family prepared quietly. They gathered documents. They contacted people she had trusted. Pieces of a larger picture began to form. The wife had not been as unaware as everyone thought. She had seen the truth. She had accepted it. And she had chosen a path of silence with purpose. As the day of the will reading approached, tension grew. The husband remained confident, though cracks appeared. The woman sensed it too. She asked questions. She pushed for reassurance. He offered words, but certainty was slipping. No one yet knew what the lawyer would say. No one yet understood how carefully the wife had planned. But one thing was becoming clear. The funeral was not the end of the story. It was only the moment when mask began to fall. After the funeral, the house no longer felt like a place of mourning. It felt like a place waiting for something to happen. The husband moved through it with growing impatience. He opened drawers that were not as before. He checked cabinets she used to organize carefully. He searched for documents, keys, anything that would give him full control. The woman he had brought to the funeral began visiting more often. At first, she came quietly in the evenings. Then she started staying longer. Soon, her shoes were near the door, her perfume in the hallway, her voice echoing in rooms that once carried soft laughter. Neighbors noticed. Curtains shifted slightly. Conversations paused when cars parked outside. The street had always been peaceful, but now it felt tense. People did not greet him the same way anymore. Inside the house, small discoveries began to unsettle him. Important files were missing from their usual places. Bank account details had been changed. Certain documents were no longer accessible with the passwords he knew. At first, he blamed stress. Then he blamed paperwork delays. But slowly, a quiet fear began to grow. He remembered how organized she had been during the last months of her pregnancy. He had thought it was nesting behavior, preparing for the baby. Now, he wondered if it had been something else. One afternoon, while searching through a drawer in her study, he found a notebook. It was simple, with no decoration. Inside were neat entries written in her careful handwriting. Dates, times, short notes. He read slowly. Some entries mentioned arguments. Others mentioned unexplained expenses. A few mentioned specific days he had claimed to be working late. She had written calmly, without emotion, just facts. There were no accusations on the pages, just observations. His hand began to shake. The notebook did not shout betrayal. It documented it quietly. He closed it quickly when he heard footsteps. The other woman walked in, asking what he had found. He hesitated before showing her. When she read a few lines, her face hardened. She was suspicious, she said. That's normal. It doesn't mean anything. But it did mean something. Elsewhere, the wife's family had started meeting regularly. They spoke in low voices, piecing together memories. One relative remembered how she had asked about legal guardianship. Another remembered how she had requested copies of property records. At the time, no one had thought much about it. Now, every small detail felt important. A close friend came forward with something unexpected. Weeks before her death, the wife had asked her to hold onto a sealed envelope. She had said, "If anything ever feels wrong, give this to my family." At the time, the friend had laughed, thinking it was just pregnancy worry. The envelope was now sitting on a living room table, unopened. When they carefully broke the seal, they found copies of financial statements, screenshots of messages, and a short letter. The letter was not dramatic. It was steady and clear. She wrote that she had discovered the truth about her husband's relationship. She wrote that she had tried to fix things privately. She wrote that her focus had shifted completely to protecting her child. She did not insult him. She did not beg for sympathy. She simply stated facts and her intentions. She ended the letter with one sentence: "Silence does not mean I did not see." Tears filled the room as her family read it. Their grief changed shape. It was no longer only sadness. It was understanding. Back at the house, tension between the husband and the other woman began to show. She had expected security, comfort, a smooth transition into a better life. Instead, she saw uncertainty. She noticed how restless he had become. He snapped more easily now. Small questions irritated him. When she asked about the upcoming meeting with the lawyer, he brushed her off. He insisted everything would go to him automatically. He reminded her that he was still legally the husband, but doubt lingered. A week before the scheduled reading, another letter arrived. This one was addressed not only to him, but also to a specific legal office. It confirmed that certain assets had been moved months earlier into a protected trust. The document was formal, stamped, and impossible to ignore. He read it twice. The date was from before her final hospital visit. She had planned ahead. That night, he barely slept. The house felt different again. Not empty, not quiet, but watchful. He walked into the nursery she had started preparing. The walls were painted a soft color. A small crib stood in the corner. Folded baby clothes rested neatly on a chair. He had never paid much attention to these details before. Now they felt heavy. For a brief moment, something close to regret flickered inside him. Not for the relationship he had hidden, but for underestimating the woman he had lived with for years. The next day, the other woman confronted him. She had heard rumors through mutual acquaintances. People were talking about legal trouble, about evidence, about how the wife had not been as unaware as everyone thought. "Are we safe?" she asked directly. He did not answer right away. That silence said more than words. Meanwhile, the lawyer handling the will had begun contacting all necessary parties. The meeting was set. Attendance was required. The tone of the messages was professional but firm. The wife's family felt nervous but prepared. They did not know exactly what the will contained, but they trusted her careful nature. She had never acted without thinking things through. In the days leading up to the meeting, more small truths surfaced. A co-worker of the husband quietly admitted seeing him frequently with the other woman long before anyone had suspected. Another person mentioned overhearing conversations about future plans that did not include his wife at all. The story was no longer rumor. It was pattern. Pressure began building from all sides. Social invitations stopped. Friendly greetings disappeared. Even casual acquaintances treated him differently. At home, arguments grew louder. The other woman demanded clarity. She had invested time and emotion into a future she believed was guaranteed. Now that future looked uncertain. "You told me everything will be fine," she said one evening. "It will be," he replied, but the confidence in his voice had faded. On the morning of the will reading, the sky was gray. The air felt thick like before a storm. He dressed carefully, choosing a suit that projected control. The other woman insisted on coming, but he refused. This meeting, he said, was private. She watched him leave with narrowed eyes. Across town, the wife's family gathered quietly outside the legal office. They held hands briefly before entering. None of them spoke much. There was sadness still, but also strength. Inside the office, chairs were arranged neatly around a polished table. Documents sat stacked in the center. The lawyer greeted everyone with measured calm. When the husband walked in, the room shifted slightly. He nodded at no one in particular and took a seat. For a moment, there was only silence. Papers were adjusted. Pens were placed neatly. The lawyer cleared his throat and began explaining the process. The husband leaned back, crossing his arms, trying to appear relaxed. He believed he understood how this would go. He had no idea how wrong he was. The lawyer's voice was calm, steady, almost gentle, as if aware of the weight every word would carry. He explained that the will had been prepared months earlier, reviewed more than once, and finalized with clear intent. The husband listened with a tight smile, nodding along, still confident that this meeting was nothing more than a formality. The lawyer began with simple details: confirmation of identity, legal statements, dates. Each sentence felt slow, measured, impossible to rush. Papers were turned carefully. Pens scratched softly against the table. No one interrupted. Then the lawyer moved on to the contents of the will. He explained that the wife had made specific arrangements for her assets, both large and small. Household items, personal belongings, keepsakes. These were listed with care, assigned to family members and close friends. The tone was respectful, as if honoring her voice. The husband's posture remained relaxed, but his eyes flicked toward the stack of documents more often now. Next came financial matters. The lawyer stated that several accounts had been placed into a protected trust. The trust had been created to secure the future of her unborn child. A legal guardian had been named. Conditions were clearly outlined. Funds could only be accessed for approved purposes related to care, education, and well-being. The husband shifted in his chair. The lawyer continued, explaining that the husband was not listed as a trustee. He would have no control over those funds. Oversight had been assigned to independent parties chosen by the wife. Silence filled the room. The husband cleared his throat and leaned forward. He asked how that was possible, insisting he had never agreed to such arrangements. The lawyer did not raise his voice. He simply explained that consent was not required for the wife to protect her own assets and her child's future. The husband's confidence cracked. The lawyer then addressed property matters. Certain properties had been transferred into the trust months earlier. Legal filings confirmed the dates. Ownership had changed quietly, lawfully, and permanently. The husband's hands tightened into fists. A relative of the wife felt tears rise, not from sadness, but from pride. This was the strength they had not fully seen while she was alive. Then came the part no one expected to hear aloud. The lawyer explained that the will included an attached statement, not a letter meant to stir emotion, but a factual record. It documented events the wife believed were relevant to the distribution of her estate. The husband straightened, his jaw tense. The lawyer read calmly. The wife stated that she had discovered her husband's ongoing relationship with another woman. She noted dates, behaviors, and financial inconsistencies. She clarified that she had chosen silence not out of fear, but out of focus. Her priority, she wrote, was stability and protection for her child. The room felt heavy. The lawyer continued reading. The wife explained that trust had been broken repeatedly. Because of this, she chose to limit the husband's involvement in matters related to her estate. She did not accuse him of causing her death. She did not use harsh language. She simply explained her decisions. The husband interrupted, raising his voice for the first time. He said this was unfair. He said private matters should not be discussed publicly. He said he was being judged without defense. The lawyer paused and looked at him calmly. He reminded him that this was not a trial. It was a reading of her final wishes. The document spoke for itself. The husband leaned back again, but the control he once showed was gone. The lawyer then explained the final provision. Because of the documented betrayal, the husband would receive only a limited portion of personal items. No shared assets. No financial control. No authority over decisions related to the trust. The will was legally sound and carefully reviewed. The wife's family listened quietly. No one smiled. No one celebrated. This was not victory. It was closure. The meeting concluded with instructions for next steps. Documents would be distributed. Legal processes would continue. The lawyer thanked everyone for their cooperation. The husband stood slowly. He looked around the room, as if searching for sympathy. He found none. Outside the office, the air felt different. Lighter. Somehow, the wife's family gathered together, holding on to one another. Grief was still there, but it no longer felt powerless. The husband stepped away alone. His phone buzzed with messages he did not answer. His steps were unsteady now. Later that day, the other woman confronted him again. She demanded to know what happened. He avoided details, but the truth slipped through in fragments. Control was gone. Money was restricted. The future they had imagined was no longer secure. Her tone changed. She accused him of lying, of promising stability he could not deliver, of dragging her into a situation that now felt dangerous. Their conversation ended without resolution, the tension thick and unresolved. Over the next few days, consequences followed quietly. Access to accounts was denied. Property discussions were halted. Legal boundaries became clear. There was no dramatic scene, no public outburst, just a slow collapse of assumptions. Meanwhile, the wife's family began honoring her in small ways. They shared stories. They remembered moments they once overlooked. Her patience, her careful planning, her quiet resilience. One relative visited the nursery she had prepared. They stood there for a long time, surrounded by softness and hope that never came to be. Tears fell, but so did understanding. She had loved deeply, even while preparing for the worst. News will spread through whispers. People who had doubted her strength began to speak differently. Respect replaced judgment. As days passed, the husband's world shrank. Invitations stopped. Support faded. The image he tried to protect unraveled without noise. And still, the wife's voice remained steady through her choices. She had spoken without raising her voice. She had protected without confrontation. She had left the truth exactly where it needed to be, waiting. After the will was read, life did not explode into drama. It changed quietly, step by step, the kind of change that does not make loud noise but slowly shifts everything. The husband returned to the house, that evening alone. The other woman had stopped answering his calls. Her last message was short and distant. She said she needed time to think. He understood what that meant. The future she had imagined with him no longer looked secure. The house felt colder than before, not because it was empty, but because it no longer felt like it belonged to him fully. Legal letters had already arrived explaining boundaries. Certain rooms and items were now under inventory. Certain accounts were frozen until further processing. Everything was controlled, measured, documented. For the first time, he realized he was not in charge. He walked into the living room and sat in silence. His eyes moved across the walls, the furniture, the small decorations she had chosen with care. He remembered how he once dismissed those details as unimportant. Now they were reminders of someone who had seen more than he thought. In the following weeks, reality settled in. The trust arrangements were finalized. Independent trustees took responsibility. Financial reports were sent regularly. Every step followed legal order. There was no space for shortcuts. The wife's family stayed respectful but firm. They did not argue with him publicly. They did not insult him. They simply allowed the legal process to speak. That quiet strength was harder to fight than anger would have been. Outside the house, social circles shifted. People who once admired him now kept distance. Conversations grew shorter. Invitations became rare. He noticed a difference in tone when he entered a room. Respect had turned into polite avoidance. The other woman eventually stopped visiting entirely. Her absence was not dramatic. She simply faded away. Without financial certainty and social approval, her confidence disappeared. What had once looked bold now looked fragile. He tried to reach her many times. Messages went unanswered. Calls were ignored. Slowly, he understood that what connected them had been built on expectation, not loyalty. Alone in the house, he began sorting through belongings, not because he wanted to, but because legal instructions required inventory. Each object carried memory. A framed photo from early marriage, a small pair of baby shoes never worn, a notebook filled with her careful handwriting. He opened the notebook again. This time, he read every page slowly. There was no hatred in her words, no threats, just observation and quiet planning. She had accepted reality long before he realized it. She had chosen preparation over confrontation. For the first time, regret felt real. Not regret for losing money, not regret for public embarrassment, but regret for underestimating someone who had loved him sincerely. He began remembering moments he once ignored, the way she looked at him when she sensed distance, the way she tried to talk calmly about their future, the way she placed a hand over her stomach, as if protecting more than just a child. The nursery remained untouched for weeks. Finally, one afternoon, he stepped inside again. Dust had settled lightly on the crib. Sunlight came through the windows softly. The room was peaceful in a painful way. He stood there longer than he expected. He realized that while he had been chasing excitement and ego, she had been building security and stability. While he believed he was ahead, she had been thinking 10 steps further. Meanwhile, her family moved forward with quiet dignity. They created a small memorial scholarship in her name, using part of the trust's allocated charity fund. It supported expecting mothers who needed medical assistance. It was something she had once spoken about casually, wanted to help others who struggled during pregnancy. The scholarship announcement spread through the community. People spoke her name with warmth. Stories about her kindness resurfaced. The focus slowly shifted away from scandal and back to her character. The husband saw the announcement online. He stared at it for a long time. He felt excluded from a legacy he once assumed would automatically include him. Months passed. Legal matters concluded smoothly. There were no court battles because the will had been carefully prepared. Every signature, every stamp, every clause was solid. Challenges would have failed. His financial situation changed significantly. Without access to certain properties and accounts, he had to adjust his lifestyle. Plans he once discussed confidently were no longer possible. He downsized quietly. Some evenings, he would sit alone and replay conversations from the past. He tried to remember when everything began to fall apart. He tried to identify the exact moment. He chose pride over partnership. But life does not offer clear timestamps for regret. Across town, her family continued honoring her in small ways. On her birthday, they gathered for dinner and shared stories. They laughed gently through tears. They spoke about her patience, her careful nature, her strength. They did not speak much about him anymore. That silence said everything. One afternoon, nearly a year later, he visited the cemetery alone. There were no cameras, no audience, no one watching. He stood quietly in front of her resting place. The air was still. He did not bring flowers at first. He did not know what to say. After a long time, he whispered a simple apology. Not loud, not dramatic, just honest. There was no response, of course. But something inside him shifted slightly. Not forgiveness, not relief, just understanding. He finally saw what others had always known. Silence had never meant weakness. Her calm had never meant blindness. Her patience had never meant ignorance. She had loved deeply, but she had also protected wisely. In the end, she did not need revenge. She did not need confrontation. She allowed truth to unfold in its own time. And it did. Years later, when people mentioned her name, they did not talk about betrayal. They talked about resilience, about preparation, about quiet strength. Her story became a reminder in the community, a reminder that dignity does not shout, that protection does not always look loud, that sometimes the strongest response is careful planning. As for him, he lived a quieter life, not ruined, not destroyed, just changed. He learned, perhaps too late, that trust is not something you can rebuild easily once broken. And whenever he thought about the final meeting in that lawyer's office, he remembered the moment he believed he understood everything. He had walked in confident. He had walked out humbled. And somewhere beyond legal documents and property transfers, the real lesson remained simple. She had seen the truth. She had prepared for it. And she had left the last word without ever raising her voice.